Greenock. Thanks very much for coming along. It's a beautiful night in Greenock. It's not very often we can say it's a beautiful night in Greenock, but it's a beautiful night in Greenock. We're here to tell you about the economic facts of independence, which is a pretty dry subject, hence the reason why I'm doing it. But I've also brought along a couple of super speakers for you tonight to lighten up a wee bit. To my left, Jim Mather, former Minister of Enterprise, Energy and Tourism, businessman and unfortunately like myself, a chartered accountant. Drew McKenzie, Jim's a Greenock boy as well as Drew. Both all Greenock boys at the table. Drew is a butcher Robert Alexander in Port Glasgow. I'm sure you saw Drew fighting his corner for Port Glasgow and economy in general in Greenock. So what I'm going to do, I will not mess about, I will let Jim come up first and tell you a little story about his. I will then do the economic case, which should just send you off to sleep quite nicely, and then I'll pass you on to Drew to wake you up again. And after we can take some questions if you get any questions at all. All I ask is when we take questions, can it please be a question and not a statement of fact or just boring at us. So please questions and answers after we speak. Very first, Jim Mather.
I'm an accountant, I've got to confess that. I've been in therapy for many years in sales and marketing and later even in politics, you know, so I'm pretty much sure of that. But it's great to be here tonight, great to see you all turning out on such a pleasant evening. I used to feel really tired when I get to Tontine Hotel because I used to be a Greenock Glen Park Harrier. By the time you run up Union Street, the prospect of Nelson Street to get up to the Orangefield is just really pretty desperate. But I feel pretty energised tonight, and I hope you're going to be energised tonight, and I hope we're going to get some really good Greenockian voices contributing to the conversation. I think what I'd like to say about Greenock is I owe Greenock a hell of a lot. You know, I was educated here. I served my CA apprenticeship here. I spent my formative years here, from washing dishes in the Duchess of Montrose as my summer job to being that CA apprentice. And I kept the connection with Greenock. I mean, I kept living here when I was working in Paisley. I kept living here when I was actually working in Edinburgh. And then when I eventually had to succumb to the power of working for IBM in Edinburgh and living there, I migrated back out to starting the Computerland franchise, and I was selling PCs and making regular visits here to Spango Valley and latterly to the new plant where the Tesco now is. But my nostalgia for Greenock is really quite material. I remember auditing Hastie's and Kincaid's, Mitchell's and Drummond's, the Greenock Provident Bank. And recently I was down in London as a visiting professor at Strathclyde, a manufacturing professor, masquerades as a manufacturing professor. And Vince Cable came and talked to us. And Vince Cable said to us, "Manufacturing Flavour of the Month now, folks, the comfort to you there. Manufacturing Flavour of the Month. It should always have been Flavour of the Month, but that's not been the case because successive London governments have set policies that suited London and the city of London to attract investment, to attract money into London." The Greenock Provident Bank. And recently I was down in London as a visiting professor at Strathclyde, a manufacturing professor, masquerades as a manufacturing professor. And Vince Cable came and talked to us. And Vince Cable said to us, "Manufacturing Flavour of the Month now, folks. The policies that suited London and the city of London policies that suited London and the city of London policies that suited London and the city of London policies that suited London and the city of London to attract investment, to attract money into London." How can we create something that allows us to get beyond that idea that businesses fold and close and die and don't continue on and evolve, that companies move house and move right out of the area like Diageo did with Kilmarnock? And essentially the data we've got suggests that there is a better way. And even in places like America, where you've got companies that are coming together, making common cause with their workers, their host community, their suppliers, long-term relationships to benefit their customers, moderating the chief executive's salary, trying to get salaries for their folk above average for the sector, aligning with the staff so the staff have a fast track to take up issues, to be involved in strategy and product development. And then when you look at the data, the companies that did that evolved, moved on, survived, and in the period 1996 to 2011, the companies that this guy's looked at outperformed the market by 10.5 times. So I look back at those companies that folded, that closed here, etc., and I view outsourcing, offshoring, easy option closure, downsizing as felonies. We should be having a better conversation than that, better outcomes, and moving things forward. And then when I look at what happened after that, the inward investment we got, IBM, Motorola, DEC, Hewlett-Packard, Compaq, etc., all of them gone away again. I think about Gavin McCrone and the work that Kenny McCaskill and I did in the Parliament in 2004 when we did a freedom of information request and what was happening with the oil back in 1974. And there was Gavin McCrone writing in 1974, see this oil, he says, it's grounds for breaking the Act of Union. This oil could make Scotland have a currency as strong as the krona. This oil could give Scotland chronic surpluses to an embarrassing degree. Think of these adjectives, chronic surpluses to an embarrassing degree. And therefore our strategy is going to be to continue the foreign investment, to bring in the Compaqs, the Hewlett-Packards, the NECs, the Caterpillars, etc., in order to take the wind out of the SNP sails. Some attempt, it didn't work, but neither did inward investment compared to what we could do in terms of growing our companies and growing it to a much, much better and more wholesome extent. So I think the issue for me is one of, we need a better way. And I stood in 1999 and didn't get into Parliament, just missed it. And I came away thinking, that was really pretty tough, because when you meet such negativity, we're too weak, we're too poor, we're too stupid to run our own affairs on a doorstep in Achiltabui on a wet night, it's kind of hard to turn that round in 60 seconds and 60 words. So I determined I would create an economic case, a precursor of what you're going to see tonight. And our economic case was based on the work of a guy called Eric Goldrat. Goldrat says, if you've got a tough challenge, get the folk together, get the flip chart up, list all the things that are holding you back, and once you've got them all listed out, get them on separate pieces of paper, move them around the table until you see the sore thumb, the core problem, the one that costs you the most money, causes you the most problems, the secondary and tertiary problems, fix that one first. So we took an economic case round Scotland, and the economic case was to say, look, it's the lack of economic powers. If you don't have the economic powers, you can't overcome the gravitational pull of London. London's got the heavyweight government, the access to capital, the centre for the media, the centre for transport. It buys up Scottish companies, bought my company up, and it pulls that wealth in. That wealth gives us the lower growth that we're stuck with. And that lower growth manifests itself, and you see it writ big in Greenock here. Short-term work, zero-hour contracts, low pay, part-time work, and a complete situation that's now been called the precariat. You know, we're creating a class of people who have got a precarious roof over their head, precarious food in the fridge, precarious shoes on the kids' feet. So we made that case, and that case essentially made big waves. It moved the SNP away from being purely a left-of-centre party to be a party pro-enterprise, pro-wealth creation with a social democratic agenda, a balanced approach, same as we've just done with that working together review. It gave us real traction, moved us real forward, got me into politics. And I'm going to continue a business analogy with you tonight. The situation we're faced with just now in Scotland is we've got the chance of a management buyout of Scotland, an employee buyout of Scotland. We all own one share in UK PLC. We can trade it in tomorrow for one share in Scotland PLC, and 5.31 million of us can wake up owning Scotland PLC on the 19th of September. In that situation, we are going to be able to drive ourselves forward with the feedback loop of getting things right when things go wrong and making the most of it. But you know what? What's really strange is, in this management buyout conversation, we're having a conversation from sensible business folk and London politicians that we're talking about a real employee buyout wouldn't be like this one. You don't get an employee buyout, and the Bank of Scotland, by the way, was the #1 lender to employee buyouts because they work. You don't get an employee buyout where they say, how are you going to get capital, how are you going to get premises, how are you going to get staff, how are you going to manage bad debt, how are you going to manage the VAT, the bookkeeping, the insurances, the problems that are going to come in. You get a management buyout saying, how are we going to do it differently? How are we going to open new markets? How are we going to change the products we've got? How are we going to premiumise these products? How are we going to reward our customers, reward our staff, tie us all into something altogether more positive and beneficial? And one of the guys that guides me is a guy called Daniel Pink. And Daniel Pink's got great advice for individuals. He says, if you want to run a sensible life where you're optimised, get clarity of purpose, get good competence, and have the autonomy to go on and get things done. And that's the secret that's beginning to be found in businesses, let alone in private situations. But in a country's basis, it's absolutely perfection. And recently, a wonderful thing happened to me that kind of proved that my delegation of my son's rearing to my wife had been a real success. Was the guy sent me a book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl's a guy that gets caught up in the concentration camps in 1946. Has a terrible time, but he survived because he's got a wee bit of medical knowledge. And when he comes home, he rips up all his psychotherapy manuals and says, that's all mince. And he writes a new therapy on one sheet of paper, like Daniel Pink would write. Purpose therapy. So he's saying to youngsters, stop asking me what life's about. Life's asking, what are you about? And his basic theory is, you're only going to be happy if you do worthwhile, meaningful work, if you form worthwhile, meaningful relationships, and you have the resilience to handle the bad stuff that's definitely going to happen. And that's what I want for Scotland. I want 5.31 million people walking that path. I want a whole nation walking that path. I want its constituent parts walking that path. And just to close, I told you it couldn't be done in 60 words or 60 seconds. But once we're making the economic case, Peter Burke, General Manager of the Bank of Scotland, was interviewed. And the journalist said to him, Mr. Burke, surely we're too small, too impecunious, too limited to run our own affairs. And Burke's answer was, I think you'll find the absurdities in the proposition. So the 60 words can be done, but the journey of thinking it through is something that we've all got to do and all put it in our own context. And in 2003, we went into the Parliament. Wendy Alexander had dug an elephant trap. She had money from Royal Bank of Scotland, Scottish Power and various others. And she was launching a thing called the Allender series of lectures. And the Allender series of lectures was a trap to park the border issue, was Wendy's catchphrase. And she brought her first guy up, William Baumol, Emeritus Professor of Economics from Princeton University. And his big advice was, why don't you just relax back and enjoy the Parliament formula, folks? So when he finished speaking, I stood up and said to him, Professor Baumol, if tonight you'd not been in Scotland, but you'd been in the fine state of Vermont, and the folk in Vermont 40 years ago had done a deal with their neighbours in Massachusetts, allowing Boston to set the tax for Vermont at the Massachusetts rate, collect it into Boston, and pay Vermont back a housekeeping allowance to cover education, health, transport, etc. And the net effect of that had been lamentable low growth, desperate poverty in parts of Vermont, the lowest life expectancy in the United States of America, and the migration of young, talented Vermonters to go and have their career in Boston. What would your advice to them be? So he looked at me and he said, well, as an American, I have to ask them to stand on their own 2 feet. And then he looked at Wendy and said, however, as a guest in the country tonight, I think I'll take the Fifth Amendment. This case is one, it's self-evidently right. You look at all of us who release our children to the world into the resilience of adulthood. This country needs to move forward to its resilience for us to take the decisions that affect Scotland in Scotland with the feedback loop that we've got with 5.31 million auditors, more than Ian and I ever were. All of us cliping and calling it when it's no right and demanding better. And out of this whole referendum campaign, we'll get 5.31 million active citizens with fascinating perspectives, clear voices, interesting views that we can all now channel into writing a constitution for Scotland that can lead the world. We can be a role model. My final comment is this. When I was in government and we were bringing this fresh bunch of ideas into government after all these years of doing politics as a part-time thing, the civil servants were mesmerised. And many of them were really excited. It was as though we'd taken wooden stakes out of the heart. And one of them, Clive Martlew, said to me, he said, okay, we get this clearer vision of what we can be, we get a better purpose of how we can do it, we bring people together where we can get everybody in Scotland in the one room and have a conversation, we can debug things and get it right, he says. He says, You know, if we did all that, do you think we could become a teaching hospital? I think we can become a teaching hospital about fair societies, better societies, societies that are going places. I think we can have a second enlightenment in Scotland. The one problem with that is I bounced it off an academic at Glasgow University who knows the Enlightenment better than I do, who knows Hume and Ferguson and others like Adam Smith almost personally. And he said to me, it'd be a much better idea if we finished the first one. Well, folks, we're going to finish the first one. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Jim. That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, try and follow that. Ian McDougall. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the economic element for Scotland and why you live in such a wealthy nation. You may not feel you live in a wealthy nation, but you do. So very quickly, my journey to Yes started about a year and a half ago when I was approached by one of the board members of Business for Scotland, asked to join the board of Business for Scotland. If you don't know Business for Scotland, with 2,700 members who think independence is a wonderful opportunity for their businesses. And we decided that we were going to have to put up a case for the SME market. 97% of private sector employees in Scotland are employed in SME businesses. You don't hear their voices very much, especially after today. So we decided that we were going to speak up for the voice of business, not just small business, medium-sized business as well. And we're going to debunk some of the myths that we knew the London-based media would throw at us over the whole campaign. And I'm sure you saw some of that over the last few months. But I'm not a blind patriot, so when I was asked to join Business Scotland, I said, let me look at the economic case first. And it absolutely astonished me. I knew Greenock for what it used to be, and it saddens me to see what it is now. But looking at the actual facts of how wealthy a country we are, it really disappointed me and surprised me about how wealthy a country we were and where we are in terms of economic growth in Scotland at the moment. So you probably already know that we're a rich country in terms of tax generation. As you can see, the last 5 years we've generated more tax than the rest of the UK, significantly more than the rest of the UK, on average £1,200 per person per year. In the last 33 years we've generated more tax. You can see the graph for us against the UK, so we're the top graph obviously. So every single year in the last 30 or so years we've generated more tax per head than the rest of the UK. So why are we not a wealthy country? If we had been independent 5 years ago, we would have generated an extra £8.5 billion we would have left over and above where we are now just by being independent 5 years ago. Imagine what you could do with £8.5 billion in Scotland today. We also spend less in terms of against our revenue than the rest of the UK, 4.3% as opposed to the UK is at 5.9%. So again, you probably hear that Scotland's got a larger public sector, or Scotland spends more on social care and housing and benefits. It's not true. We spend 44% on GDP against the 45% in the rest of the UK. So we spend less per head than the rest of the UK, we generate more revenue per head than the rest of the UK. And we've also got higher GDP per head. GDP is effectively turnover per head, if you want to call it that. Not profit, not tax generated, but turnover per head. 11% higher in 2012-13 and 18% in 2012-13. And the astonishing thing about this is that you might think, well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? Because we've got oil and gas and we generate a lot of money in oil and gas, as you probably know. But if you take oil and gas out of these numbers, we've actually got this exact same GDP as the rest of the UK. So it makes you think about oil and gas and you think, well, why is there such a big deal about oil and gas? If oil and gas is the cherry on the cake, why are we so concerned about it? Why do the no guys focus on the price of oil and gas, the volatility of oil and gas? It doesn't actually matter. We've got such a strong economy that even without oil and gas, we've still got the same GDP as the rest of the UK. Where do we rank? We would rank about 14th in the world. So Scotland, in day one of independence, we were the 14th richest country in terms of GDP in the world. And that's astonishing, absolutely astonishing. The UK is something like 18th at the moment. In previous years, we were actually in the top 10, but tax revenues were down on gas a year or so ago, and I'll explain why. So we're now 14th in this list. But I think the most astonishing thing on that list isn't necessarily the fact that we are very close to the top 10. It's the small countries in there. Luxembourg, Norway, Switzerland, Denmark, Sweden, Austria, Netherlands. These are all small countries. And you might say, well, obviously Norway's going to be in there, and obviously Switzerland's going to be in there, but why are Austria, Finland, Netherlands, why are they so wealthy? And what good quality of life have they got compared to Scotland? So, We are a wealthy country. We generate a lot of revenue. It's not just oil and gas. Oil and gas makes up 15% of Scotland's revenues. In Norway, it makes up 25%. They say anything more than 20-25 is slightly dangerous. Oil and gas is only 15% of Scotland. We're strong in food and drink, life sciences, manufacturing, lead the world in education. We are strong in many sectors. We export over £100 billion worth of goods, good evening, Billy. In food and drink is a perfect example of that. £5.1 billion export value. The UK's growth rate at the moment is something like 1 to 2%, depending on when you've looked over the last year or so. We're expecting to grow food and drink by 50% in terms of exports in the next 3 years. That's the kind of targets we've got for food and drink in Scotland. Massive growth targets. And Scotland's aiming to grow by at least 5% a year moving forward. We've got higher ambitions for Scotland than we've got for the rest of the UK, and that's why we're aiming big. And I was at an event not so long ago. It was a food and drink event, and I was asking, why is there was lots of small businesses there. There was no whisky companies, and no fish companies, salmon, prawns, langoustines, these kind of guys. And I asked the question, where are these guys? And the answer was, they don't have to turn up at selling events. The salmon guys are almost sold out. They can't sell any more salmon. So why turn up at an event and sell if you've already sold out? Same with whisky, it's absolutely booming. A massive, strong sector. And that's not because we rely on the UK industry network. That's because Scots are entrepreneurial. We go around the world, we find deals, we make money. That's what we do. And if we want to get our products into Hong Kong duty-free shop, I won't rely on the UK embassy in Hong Kong. I'll speak to a man who works there. We'll know somebody who's been out there. We'll know a Scot who used to work there and a Scot who used to work somewhere else. We go find opportunities. We don't rely on the UK embassy network to help us find opportunities. And in fact, they actually charge whisky companies to display their goods in embassies, which is astonishing. So as I said, we're a rich country, wealthy country. Even without oil and gas, from day one of independence, Standard & Poor's have said that we will have an investment-grade credit rating. And one of the credit rating agencies also said that if the UK doesn't agree to a currency union, their credit rating will slip below that of Scotland. So again, you may hear the scare stories about, oh, well, under an independent Scotland, surely your mortgage interest will be high, your credit cards will be high. Tell me why they would be more expensive if it's less expensive for us to borrow. They won't be. It's a ridiculous scare story. So, I bet you think we're wealthy, but I bet you don't feel wealthy. I bet you don't look around you in Greenock and think, God, this is a wealthy place, this is just like Dubai without the sun. I'll tell you why. There's our GDP there. So there's how much revenue is generated in the map of the UK. So you can see the hot spots. Aberdeen, obviously. London is very hot as well down there, a lot of black bit. Look at the rest of Scotland, very strong. No bugger lives up there, so there's not really any generation up there. But look at Northern Ireland, look at Northern England, look at Wales, look at the southwest of England. Very low revenue generation. Look at Scotland. It's an absolute powerhouse of generation. And that's how wealthy Scotland is. So why aren't we wealthy then? Why don't we? Why have we got 800,000 people living in poverty? Because of that there, as Jim touched on it earlier on, the suck of wealth down south. That there is the regional distribution of wealthiest households, Office of National Statistics. Over £1 million is the dark colour, is the level of wealth that people have. It's inheritance tax, that's what you die with effectively. And look where the wealth ends up, at the dark parts of it. So you can see that wealth just being sucked right down. And that's why we're not a wealthy country. Something that's also, again, I focus on economy, but it's not just about economy. That there is life expectancy. So guess what the dark is? You die young, simple as that. The lighter it is, the longer you live. So as you can see, obviously Wales struggles a bit as well. Look at the whole of Scotland. Look at Glasgow. They couldn't find a colour any darker there to put in for Shettleston and places, and these places in the East End that are dying at late 50s as opposed to 77, 78 in the southwest of Scotland. And that's the most appalling thing about it. There's dripping of wealth, there's this lack of health, lack of living, lack of quality, and sheer heavy amounts of poverty in Scotland. So, we've got a strong economy, we're a wealthy economy, we generate a lot of money, but it doesn't stay here, it slips out of the country, it moves away. So we've got a chance to change it, and this is what the 18th of September is all about. It's a chance to change this, it's a chance to make change. Because let me tell you something now as well, there is no such thing as a status quo. If we vote no on the 18th of September, it's not just going to stay the same. We've got years and years of austerity, and I'm just about to show you how much debt that the UK has. We've got lots and lots of austerity coming through the system. You must feel it yourself. Your pay is tighter and tighter and tighter. Your taxes are increasing. You're paying for more things and more things. Local authorities are getting less money from the Scottish Government, who are getting less money from Westminster. Tighter and tighter and tighter. More and more people getting dragged into poverty. 800,000 Scots at the moment in poverty, moving towards 1 million by the time Mr Osborne's finished his austerity cuts in the next 2 years. So don't think a no vote is just keeping what you have today. It's only going to be worse. Here's just a little story. I'm going to do a few scare stories for you. I'm going to debunk a few scare stories. There's a little story about the Daily Express said in 1979 before the last referendum. If you can't read that, I'll just say, how much of Scotland's economy will be left intact if a Scottish Assembly gets the go-ahead? Will our coal mines go gaily on? Will Ravenscraig or Linwood thrive? Will Bathgate flourish and Doonreid prosper? All gone. So I'll debunk a few myths for you. I am exhausted with scare stories. I live every day with it, try to debunk them. The biggest one at the moment, I think, is probably, especially for older people, is pensions. Right? So pensioners are clearly worried about their pension, which is only understandable, but they have absolutely no need to worry. Ignoring the fact that only Mexicans have a worse state pension than the British, we have got some of the worst state pensions in the world, in the absolute world. We've got the poorest level of private sector contribution in pensions as well, horrendous levels. Since Gordon Brown took tax credits out of dividends, private pension investment was decimated in the UK. And Gordon Brown comes here and tells us about pensions. He was in Glasgow about 6 weeks ago, scaring grannies, telling them about their pension. The UK government's accepted that they will pay a pension. I'm sure they don't know if anybody knows anybody who lives abroad. If you live abroad, you're a pension, you get your pension. So why, if you live in Scotland, after retirement, would you not get your pension? And someone very cleverly wrote to, there's one of these letters up the back page, if you know any pensioners, I don't think there's any pensioners then, if you know any pensioners, apart from, yeah, there is one, there's a little letter up the back there, which is that letter. Someone wrote to the Department of Work and Pensions, saying, look, what will happen in independent Scotland? If Scotland goes independent, what will happen to my pension? And as you can see, they've just basically clarified, if Scotland does become independent, this will have no effect on your state pension. You will continue to receive it just as you do at present. Okay? So let's not get scared about pensions. Pensions will be paid. No one will invest in Scotland during the referendum campaign. That was a scare story about a year or so ago. Because of this uncertainty, that no one will invest in Scotland. Investment will flock out of the country and all the jobs will disappear. Unfortunately, Ernst & Young debunked that for us. Their IDOL Club, which looks at inward investment in the UK. Scotland had massive investment in the last year, second best in the UK out with London, and absolutely flying through the roof in terms of investment. So again, they said in their words, inward investment has not been affected whatsoever by the referendum. Great, up to this day's date. So what happens after it? Well, the only way to look at it is to look at history. What's history told us about countries that went independent? Here we've got 6 countries that went independent over the years. You don't have to see the detail of it, you just have to see the curve. Look at the level of investment into these countries after they became independent. Okay, Slovakia, Estonia, Lithuania, massive investment. And there's a very simple reason for that, is that money follows money, right? Corporates make money. So they look for countries to make money, and that's why they went to these countries. They'll go and find countries that are making money and they will invest in those countries. Scotland, as you know, has got very rich natural resources. So we will attract companies. As Jim said, be careful what we attract, absolutely. But we will attract inward investment. Scotland will not become a barren field after independence. If anything, if history repeats itself, it will continue to grow. Oil's running out. Many times we've heard that. I'm sure I was only a baby in the first referendum. I'm not saying Jim wasn't, but I'm sure, I think at that point we were told there was 20 or 25 years left of oil and gas in 1979. But now we know there's 35, 40 at least in the North Sea. They're finding massive oil developments all over the west of Shetland. Oil will be here for, I suspect, all our lifetimes and some more again. And it is absolutely booming. I was in Aberdeen last week, speaking to a company who own a chain of bars and restaurants, casinos. And I asked them, what is the issues facing their business? And they said, we can't stop chefs going on the oil rigs for less than 60 grand a year. That is their problem. You go to Glasgow, you go to Edinburgh, and they're talking about forcing down their prices, people with less money in their pocket, that sort of thing. Aberdeen is absolutely booming, absolutely booming. So ignore BP and Shell, Aberdeen is booming and continue to boom and will continue to boom. And it's moving to Shetland and it's moving round to the west coast. And many of you may not know, but they applied to drill for oil on the west coast of Scotland many years ago, and it was rejected by Michael Heseltine, because oil rigs and Trident submarines don't really go hand in hand. So I don't know there's oil off the Firth of Clyde. I suspect there may be. I suspect there's certainly oil up the west coast. And just imagine Greenock, Inverclyde, Ardrossan, Kilmarnock, Irvine. Imagine all these places like Aberdeen. Imagine that wealth kind of generation bringing through there. So imagine full employment for these areas. We'll never know. We'll never know if we don't vote for independence. We will be stuck with Trident and we will never know what it could be like unless we vote for independence. As I said before, it's only 15% of our economy. Okay, so if it is volatile, if price does move up and down, so what? Really, does it really matter? If we've only got 18 billion barrels and not 24 billion barrels, does it really matter? I don't think so. And the thing about oil is that, not just oil, Scotland's blessed, absolutely blessed in the lottery of its natural resources. We've got 1% of Europe's population and 60% of its oil and gas, 25% of its tidal energy, 10% of its wave. We are absolutely blessed with it. And I always think of, when we talk of volatility of oil, I always think of German chancellors waking up and saying, I'm glad I don't have that oil and gas problem, that's a headache, the wake is up and down in price and you need to do all the companies investing money, it's just a bloody nightmare. So, oil and gas is a bonus for us, an absolute bonus. And there's also something else going about oil and gas. Oil and gas platforms, rigs all around the world are growing. I was meeting at the chat today, it showed the growth all around the world in terms of oil and gas. And what we're seeing more and more of is Scottish expertise going to these countries. Service companies based in Aberdeen now exporting their expertise, exporting their goods, their products, absolutely booming all around the world. So again, just some highlights in terms of how much oil and gas is in there. I think we know there's plenty of it, I think we know there's plenty to be found. So I don't suspect oil and gas will be a problem. So massive investment in the last few years, £14 billion last year in oil and gas, £13 billion investment the previous year, and that's why oil revenues have been down in the last few years. Because very simply, if you invest in capital, like in a business, oil and gas is the same, you get tax relief for it, so therefore you pay less tax. So therefore the Scottish Government in the last 2 years, the UK Government has got less tax from oil and gas revenues. But you're not going to invest £13 billion last year and £14 billion this year if you don't think you're going to make a hell of a lot more money in the future. So why would we invest in that kind of money if there's not huge benefits to be seen in the North Sea in the next 15, 20, 30, 40 years? Defence, very relevant again for this area, hugely relevant. We've got Trident submarines across the water. We contribute £3.3 billion a year. Scotland's share of the defence budget, that's what we put in. We actually spend £1.9 billion. That was a Freedom of Information Act request that the Ministry of Defence refused for many, many, many months until some determined soul dragged it out of them and proved that we're actually over £1 billion a year better off because we don't spend this money in Scotland, it gets spent somewhere else. So when we create the Scottish Defence Force, it will be based at Faslane and Kilport. It will be based across the water. And I live in Greenock and I've been in Europe most of my life, and I don't see much of a spin-off apart from the jobs based at Faslane, which is something like 800. Not, as you may read in the local paper, anywhere between 800 and 800,000 jobs, depending on who's writing the story. There's going to be a defence force, head of Navy, head of Army, just across that water. So what's that going to do to this area? Do you think that will boost this area? Do you think this will benefit this area? Having the head of your forces across that water? Absolutely. So, again, shipbuilding. And this pays me to say this absolutely pays me to say this. Someone whose uncles, whose grandfathers worked for shipyards, is that Scotland doesn't have a shipbuilding industry anymore. What we've got is we've got a state-sponsored defence programme, okay, that leaves a couple of thousand guys up the Clyde hanging on by their fingernails every year, just hoping that they get another ship, hoping they get another frigate to build. And that's not an industry. That's not viable. That's not viable long term. There's no competition for these guys' jobs. They can't go and join another shipyard like they could somewhere else. And don't listen to the story that ships are only built in low-wage economies now. Germany builds ships. Norway builds ships. If you build clever technology ships, you can have a shipbuilding industry again. It will never be what it was, but it can be a lot better. And it's not going to be, as part of the UK, they'll use the Glasgow yards for nothing other than building and defence ships, because they won't invest in the industries. Other countries have invested in the shipbuilding industry and they're seeing the benefits of it. We have to invest in our manufacturing industries. So the story is that the shipyards in Glasgow won't build any warships anymore because we're not part of the UK. And I put this little thing off the MOD website not so long ago. The government has made a concerted effort to renew and strengthen our relationship with one of our oldest allies. The Royal Navy and the Royal Australian Navies are building a ship together. So they're quite happy to build ships with somebody the other side of the world, but they're not happy to build ships with somebody a couple of miles up the border. So again, a nonsense story. The reason they're building ships in Glasgow is the guys in Glasgow are the best people to build the ships. It's as simple as that. So, we've got a diverse economy, strong economy, wealthy economy, but we're not keeping it here. So, you've been asked to stay part of the UK, you've been asked to stay part of the strength of the UK balance sheet. You probably hear politicians say these things to you. Part of the UK, stronger together, better than the UK. Let's look at the UK. National debt is actually more than £1,300 billion. It goes up very, very, very quickly. Last year alone, the UK lost £107 billion. There's 1,000 million in a billion. That's a lot of money. It lost £107 billion last year. It lost £11 billion in 6 weeks since I started thinking about this event. And it's paid interest on that debt in 6 weeks of £4 billion. These are astonishing amounts of money, absolutely astonishing amounts of money. And it's going up, the debt is going up. And what happens when the debt goes up? It becomes more expensive to service. Interest rates are not going to stay low for the next few years, guys. They are going to go up. And therefore the cost of servicing that debt is going to go up. And this is going to become more and more expensive. That debt is moving up towards 1,700 million. George Osborne said it would stop losing money in 2015. Where are we? 2014. Or we're 2017 and 18. Until they even stop the debt losing money. And then they have to start repaying the debt. Who's going to repay that debt? Who's going to, when that hits £1,700 billion, who's going to repay that debt? You guys are going to repay that debt. If you're part of the UK, that's coming out of your taxes. It's as simple as that. £1,700 billion has to be repaid somehow, and the only way it can be paid is through tax. And not in a nice way, not in a, we're really sorry we messed the economy up, we're just going to have to make taxes 30% for everybody and 85% for millionaires. It's going to be stealth taxes. It's going to be little indirect taxes you don't even see, moving VAT up from 15 to 17 to 20, moving company car benefits all the way up, taking up more money out of the economy, increasing taxes all the time, all these little stealthy taxes. There's been 130 stealth taxes since Mr Blair came into power in 1997. Taxes you don't even know if you, because they made a promise they won't increase tax, they won't increase the main rates of tax in brackets, but will increase every other bloody tax we can make up along the way. You're going to get a lot more of them, because that debt's got to be repaid somehow. So we've lost £15 million in 6 weeks. What is £15 million? 17 new Southern General Super Hospitals every 6 weeks. 35,000 nurses every 6 weeks, and a new fourth row crossing every 5 days. That's the amount of debt that the UK has. It's got the third worst debt to income ratio in the world. Astonishing amounts of money, and you repay it. Just very quickly on Mr Brown, as I said, Gordon was in Glasgow 6 weeks ago, threatening pensioners, and he was trying to tell Scotland how to go in terms of their economy. Let's just remember 2007. We're all trying to forget the recession in 2007. I was, because I set my business up on the same day. So we're trying to forget that recession. But what happened in 2007 wasn't a worldwide banking crash, as you'll hear Alistair Darling say. It was a US and part of Europe banking crash, right? And it was created by deregulating the banks in those countries. Who deregulated the banks? Alistair Darling and Gordon Brown. And the UK economy at that point was also overcooking anyway. It wasn't just a case of everything was going fine, the banks crashed, all hell broke loose. The UK debt was already increasing, had been increasing for the last 2 or 3 years, and increasing rapidly. They were overspending, the economy was starting to slow down, and then the banks crashed. It almost saved their bacon, because they can now blame someone else instead of looking themselves in the mirror every morning and say, I created that problem, I made that mess. What they did is they turned around and said, it was those pesky banks that did it, playing with their money, but they deregulated the banks. So Mr Brown and Mr Darling come to town and tell you how to vote, just think about it. So, again, what cost of New Scotland? And also, people ask about how much it cost for New Scotland. Better Together made up a long story saying it would be £2.7 billion from the bold professor in the School of Economics in London. He came out the next day and said that's an absolute lie. The truth is something like 200 or 600 million pounds. Scottish Government say they're going to invest £3.6 billion, not in new departments, but growing the economy, growing manufacturing, growing the economy, investing in the economy over the next 3 or 4 years. And £3.6 billion is a lot of money, absolutely. But what's the alternative? You stay part of the UK, we'll have HS2. Sorry, we won't have HS2. HS2 will go from London to Birmingham, maybe to Manchester, and something like 2030, possible Leeds. £50 billion for a railway line that doesn't even come to Scotland. Your share of that, £5 billion. Okay? That does not benefit you whatsoever. There's also a report carried out that says that rail line will not only not benefit Scotland, but it will suck wealth from Scotland as well, because it will bring up some parts of the rest of the UK, which will suck wealth out of Scotland. So £5 billion for a rail line you will never ever use. London Crossrail, 15 billion, almost spent, 13 billion of it gone. Again, another 1.5 billion pounds of your wealth spent on a train line that doesn't benefit you at all. All these things are done to benefit the City of London. They're not done to benefit Manchester, Leeds. They're done to suck people to London and make London a bigger city. And I saw a report last night that says London needs £1.5 trillion of investment over the next 30 years to continue its growth. And they will get that 1.5 trillion, I suspect they know where what is it coming from, the North Sea, Shetland. So, your share of 2 rail projects, £6 billion. So you can have your own country that cost over £3.6 billion, grow your country, invest in it, or you can build a couple of railway lines that you probably never ever use or be any benefit to you and pay £6 billion for it. I know what I would prefer. So, I think what I'm saying to you today is that Scotland's a strong country, it's got a diverse economy, a wealthy economy, but we're not spending it wisely. Or I should say, someone is not spending it wisely on our behalf. We've got massive levels of poverty, 800,000 people live in poverty, and I'm not going to sit here next to anybody in social justice. I'm a capitalist, pipe by pure admission. But what I would say to you is that 800,000 people in poverty is also not good for the business community, because you get 800,000 people who are not consumers, they can't buy goods. So if you've got almost a fifth of your population who can't actually buy your goods, your services, your products, can't come into your hotel, can't come into your butcher shop, can't use your services, that's not good for business, and it's not good for the economy. And what we need to do is get that level of poverty down, get these people back working, create higher value jobs, grow the economy. And we can't do that, staying in the situation. So obviously I'm a typical Scot, hard working, reasonably clever. I've got some morals. I'm 5'7", 10.5 stone, soaking wet, and I've got an eye for making a few pounds. And I think that's the way the rest of the world will see Scotland. Is we're a go-ahead country. We're small, but we punch above our weight. We're clever, we've got morals, we've got good educational standards, we're clever, strong people. And I think what we have to do is get started. Mark Twain, the secret of getting ahead is to get started. September the 18th is when we can get started. I like Jim Sellers. I spoke with Jim Sellers one night, fantastic, brilliant speaker, out of this world. And he said, on September the 18th, you've got your freedom for 18 hours. Whether you decide to give that freedom back at the end of that day is your choice when you get into that voting booth. So you've got your freedom, you've got your sovereignty, you've got it for 18 hours. So don't walk out there at 10 o'clock on the 18th and give that back. Make the right decision for Scotland. Thank you very much. Right, you can all wake up now. Next up, Drew McKenzie, who's going to say some wonderful words for us and liven this up a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. It was very interesting to hear the financial aspects of it, and Jim here is giving you the political views of it. I think I should go over what my qualifications for actually being here this evening are. But you know, when you go somewhere strange to a different town and you don't know your way about, you're looking for some advice, maybe you want to find directions, you want to find somewhere somebody lives, anything about the area. Well, those of you who are wise, you don't go and ask a policeman, you go to the butcher shop and he'll tell you everything you want to know. I think it's in that premise that I'm invited here this evening. If you'd asked me 2 years ago if I thought Scotland should be an independent country, I'd probably have shrugged my shoulders and said, why bother? I'm sure a lot of you here are probably thinking the same. But my views have changed. And I'll try and explain what's making change. I'm a butcher at trade, and I've been working at the butchery for now almost 40 years. Served my time with my late grandfather, Robert Alexander, in Port Glasgow. And we've always had retail shops, but we built our business up on supplying the shipyards with our meat for the shipyard canteens. My grandfather opened a shop in Port Glasgow in 1942, and almost immediately the shipyard started to have canteens. I'm proud to say we supplied her from the day they opened to the day they closed. It was a big part of our business. I remember starting work when I was 14, but when I was about 16, 17, I was still at high school. They used to send a van down for me on a Friday afternoon so I could be at the shop behind the counter for back at 4 o'clock. Because at that time, what happened was the factories came out in Port Glasgow. AMP, Singamo, Blacks, Playtex. And the woman headed over to the shop. They'd been working full time, they get paid cash on a Friday afternoon. And they came to the butchers and they spent the cash. Port Glasgow was bustling, it really was. Every shop in the town was full. There was a lot of energy about the place. The working man is easy satisfied. The man worked in the yards, the woman worked in the factories. They could go their foreign holiday every year. They drove a nice car, the house was nicely furnished. We go out to the club at the weekend, have a drink and a dance. And they were happy with their lot. And they walked about the town with a spring in their step. And now I look at Port Glasgow, and the town's quieter. But you look at the people, and you don't see that spring in the step anymore. What you see in the faces is despair and resignation. You see it in the guys at 55 to 60, wondering if they'll ever work again. And you see it in the boys at 17 and 18, wondering if they'll ever get a real job or get an apprenticeship. There's a poverty. And I don't mean that necessarily a poverty of cash. There's a poverty of spirit. And while I'm saying this is Port Glasgow, I could probably take that and transport it and make it any town in Scotland. Because that is where we're at the moment. It's only too easy to blame anybody for the demise of the industry in this town. But we've got to accept where we are at present. You might ask what the effect of this has on my business at present. We're quieter. We've got to watch our margins. We've got to be good at what we do. But you see the trends of the people coming in changing. Good customers that have come in over the years would spend a lot of money on me. Money was no object to them. And now you see them looking at the scale. Now you see them maybe not wanting quite as big a bit of joint, just cutting back. You've got other folk, they come in for your special offers, and that's all they buy. And then they go to the man down the road and they buy his special offers. Now, we all like a bargain. We all like to save money, but these people are not saving money. They don't have any money to save. But then we've got people that come in and all they want is a bone for the dog, a bone for soup it is, or a ham hock. And that's what they're getting by on. They're taking this home, and you tell me the way they speak to you. They don't want to pay too much for it, if anything. And they take that, and they get their vegetables, and they go down to Tesco's and buy yesterday's loaf for 50 pence. And that's what they're putting in their stomach. And that is what we're faced with in Port Glasgow just now. It makes me angry when I see that. Also makes me angry when I look round the corner on Brown Street. Because there in Port Glasgow, we've got a food bank now, run by the Congregational Church. I have such admiration for the ladies who operate that place. Is there a place for a food bank in modern society? It's easy to politicise food banks. If you read the Daily Mail or the Daily Express, they'll tell you that it's a great social concept and we're lucky to have them. And they make out as if in the weeks when you can't afford to go to Morrison's or Tesco's, you'll nip along to the food bank and they'll carry you over till you've got enough money. Well, I can assure you, the food banks are not like that. Because when you go to use one of these places, there's tears before you go in. And when you get your stuff, there's tears when you come back out. When you look at the internet, what do you see? You see politicians opening, David Mundell and Danny Alexander, opening their local food banks, cutting the ribbon with smiles on their faces, and they don't see the irony of that situation. I'll tell you a quick story of the food bank Port Glasgow. There was a chap came from Greenock, and that's what happens. There's a stigma attached to you. And the people from Greenock, they try and go to the Port Glasgow food bank. And the people for the port, they try and get up to down to Greenock to use it during the MKSND season. This chap walked 3 miles from Greenock to the port. And the girls there gave him 3 big bags of messages that he carried 3 miles home. And the next day he turned up at the church again. But this time he was there looking for food. What he'd done is he brought with him a wee trowel and a rake. And he was determined he was going to do the grounds of the church. That's pride. That's self-esteem. Tesco's nationally had a thing 2 months ago where they were collecting for food banks. And what you did was you bought a wee bit extra, and when you went through the checkout, you put it in a bin, and that all it went to the food bank. Guess what Tesco collected more than anywhere else nationally? Port Glasgow. The people who have less came on. It's in the Scottish psyche. We're there to look after our aim. It's not into us when we're means. Try and look after people that are less fortunate than yourself. And I tell you this, because I want you to compare it with what you see coming from the City of London. The greed that emanates from that place. Start with the politicians, the members of Parliament, all caught with their noses in the trough, claiming their expenses, sometimes ludicrously so, time and time again, all the way to Downing Street. Some of them went to jail for it, and they're still doing it, all being in the margins of legality. Next door in the House of Lords, that obscenity, 850 members now, every one of them unelected, £300 a day plus your perks for turning up. Take a look at the interests of the members of the House of Lords. Look and see how many of them have directorships of financial interests in arms companies. Look and see how many of them have the same in healthcare companies. A conflict of interest, if I've ever seen one. The last input into the House of Lords, the last intake, the majority of them are party donors. You can buy a lordship in this country. The politicians, in bed with the arms dealers, in bed with the bankers. People think, they ask, do you resent the bankers? Of course I do. When you're like me and you go to your bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, on a cold winter's morning, to go and run a business, to try and keep your head above water, to take the responsibility of keeping people in jobs, and then you hear of these chancellors getting £1 million a year, plus maybe double that for bonuses. And they work for a company that's been doing the tubes and has been bailed out by the government. They're billions of pounds in debt, and still they justify paying hundreds of their senior employees over £1 million a year. They say, if we don't pay these wages, we don't get the right kind of people. That's the right kind of people that got us into the mess in the first place. That's the right kind of people that are still frauding us and still cheating us now with their interest rate scandals and their PPI and all the other things, selling loans to businesses that were no use, and then the businesses going down the tubes and then selling the assets to that business. It wasn't the single mother from the port that got us into the mess. It wasn't the wee woman who decides this week whether to take heat or eat. It wasn't the wee boy who's packing the shelves in Poundland, wondering if he'll ever get a real job. It wasn't them who got us into this mess. It was the chancers and the white boys in the city of London. I think it doesn't matter who you support, whether you're a yes or no. I think identifying we need to change the system. If anybody can tell me how we can do that within our current system, within the current Westminster setup, I'd be interested to hear. There's a possibility, there's a chance we can do it with independence. If we can do it, we can certainly do it more quickly. Alex Salmond, the SNP, presented his white paper, 650 pages, what a vision for Scotland could be. It's nothing more than an SNP wish list. You could spit holes in it. It's full of assumptions. But it was a good start. It was a good start to portray a vision of what an independent Scotland could look like. What do we get from the other side? Barely nothing until yesterday, when Mr. Cameron and Mr. Miliband and Mr. Clegg came into it. And they've promised us more powers, but they can't quite tell us what these powers are yet because they've no agreed on them. They've no claim to have consensus of what they might be, but they'll be able to tell us by the end of October. And by the end of November, they might have written it down. And by the time the first Parliament is elected next year, they'll put some legislation in place for it. They've had 2 years to present to us a vision of what a buoyant Scotland, a modern Scotland, would look like within the Union. And 8 days before the referendum, they turn up in Scotland and they tell us we might get more powers. This is after tens of thousands of people have already voted. I don't know about you, but I find that demeaning, degrading, and disrespectful to everybody in this country. All along they've tried to scare us. You can't do this. You wouldn't be able to do that. Or worse, we'll not allow you to do that. The currency. You'll not be able to use the pound. What's your plan B? Well, I'll give them a message from Port Glasgow. The people in the street in Port Glasgow are not interested in the mechanisms of the currency. They're interested in whether they have a job and whether they can feed their wains. And that is the reality of the situation. But you don't have a union of 300 years found to be useless. You don't have a union built up over that time that doesn't serve a purpose. You think of all the cross-border associations, both political and social. These will all continue. Every one will have to be discussed further and probably renegotiated. Some of these will take 2 minutes. Others will take much longer. But what we'll have at the end of this is a new union. And it will be a union of equals. And that is what a union should be. We've all got strong opinions of what is right and what is wrong in this campaign. And it's amazing to see people who you respect sometimes having contrasting differences. I think in Port Glasgow, two of the major companies there, the polythene place at Boxing, Cameron McClatchy's place, and he's on record as saying that he can see no upside in an independent Scotland for this business. And so be it. But just yesterday, Ferguson Shipyard was sold to Jim McCall's company. Jim McCall, a great advocate of independence, and he plans to spend £8 million in upgrading the facilities there, and he intends to quadruple the workplace. And if that is not saying that he is confident of independence and a future Scotland, then I don't know what is. People ask me, how will independence affect my business? And I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think it will affect it much. It might affect the price of beef one way or the other. But the one thing I know for sure is that if the man in the street is better off, then my business will be better off. And Ian touched on this, and that is so important in a modern Scotland, that we must get the lot of the working man up. We must bring the people at the bottom up. And if we can do that without bringing the people at the top down, then great. People say to me, you're living in a naive world. We've got to have people at the bottom there. We've got to have the poor folk. But the day we stop trying to bring people up in this world and helping the people produce is the day we lose our humanity. That is an essential part of a new Scotland. But let me warn you, an independent Scotland is not going to be a land of milk and honey immediately. I'm impressed when Ian shows us the graphs of the newly independent companies in newly independent countries, the way they rise. I think we're in for a wee tough time ahead, even with the yes vote. That austerity that's sweeping Europe, don't think for a minute it's going to escape Scotland. There'll be difficult choices to make, but I tell you, there'll be our choices. We'll make mistakes, but they'll be our mistakes, and we can fix them, and we can do it right. Next week we go to the polls, and there's that question. Should Scotland be an independent country? Of course, there's the underlying question, and that is, do we, the people of Scotland, the men and women who work here, do we think we are better equipped to decide what's best for our country and run our country? Or should we leave it to people 400 miles away to decide what's best for us? That is the question we're facing next week. I'd just like to leave you with one comment. Over the last year, I've had great pleasure going round umpteen meetings throughout Scotland for the referendum campaign. Mostly for the yes campaign, sometimes for the no, sometimes debates for both sides. And my one memory, when this is done and dusted, my one feeling that I'll take away from it, is that in crowded rooms, where people are assembled from all walks of life, from every end of the political spectrum, the overriding feeling in every time this happened was one of respect in that room. Respect for each other's political viewpoint, whatever that may be. Respect for each other as an individual and as a human being. And I just say that if we go forward with that attitude, all these people who have been newly embraced into the political scene in Scotland, if they go forward with that same respect to form a new nation, I tell you, there is no end to what we can achieve.
That was fantastic, thanks very much, Drew. We're going to take some questions. Michelle's going to help us take questions. We'll take two at a time. Just any questions you want. As I said, please try and avoid giving us the state of the nation statements and try and generally give us some questions. There must be somebody out there who's got some genuine questions about the future of an independent country. So please put your hands up and Michelle will get some questions.
Hi Ian. I've just got two questions in general. One was with I think it was the CEO of Asda today saying food prices will go up. And secondly, it's the no campaigns propaganda that for the last 33 years, 22 of those years Scotland has run a deficit. So could you just address those questions, please?
I'll take the first part there. I'm caught here, I didn't hear the second part. But David Cameron spent his life just now phoning around business leaders to get them to make such comments as the guy from Asda made. And it kind of baffles me because property's cheaper up here, wages are cheaper up here, Scotland's a net exporter of food, and it just baffles me that they've come to that conclusion and said that. The key thing also is that Scotland's going to have a very sharp fiscal pencil. We're going to have lower rates of tax on businesses to allow businesses to thrive here. And that's not anything other than about making businesses more successful, getting more folk at work, getting more folk able to afford to put food on the table, as Drew was saying today. And if you look across Europe, you see a pattern of small country to big country. You know, Denmark with lower taxes than Germany, Finland with lower taxes than Sweden, Estonia with lower taxes than Finland, Portugal with lower taxes than Spain, Ireland famously with lower taxes than the UK. So we will compete and we will do well. And you know, the situation is one of moving towards a fairer society, a higher wage society, and in that we become the balanced player that Drew's advocated, healthier, etc. And all of that starts to play into a virtuous circle. If more folk are in work, feeding themselves well, making good choices, that there's less pressure on our social work departments, less pressure on our health service, less pressure on the education system, the justice system, etc. A succession of virtuous circles. So thanks for the prod, Mr. Asda. We'll get an answer to it and we'll take it on.
In terms of the deficit, every country in the world ran a deficit last year with the exception of Norway. Many countries in the world run deficits quite regularly. But it's not uncommon. But I think what you have to look at is when you look at the Scottish deficit, what's included in there, as I showed you about the defence budget, our costs that get allocated to Scotland, 3.3 billion, when you actually spend 1.9 billion. We also contribute something like £6 billion towards UK national debt, a debt that we've not actually ran up, because we've been paying more tax in than we have 33 years. So we pay towards the UK's debt, a debt that we didn't actually create in the first place. So if you take out some of these so-called costs of being part of the UK, I think it's again, as Jim mentioned, the magic buyout. You do a magic buyout, you get there and you open up the books, and sometimes it's pretty and sometimes it's not, right? So you're looking inside these books, and I think when we open up the Westminster books, I think we realise exactly what we've been paying for over the years and what's been attributed to the Scottish people is not actually what we've been spending. So I suspect the answer about do we run deficits? Yeah, absolutely. In the last few years we've run deficits like the rest of the world. But I'm surprised in any of these other years without the UK debt, without the overspend. If you're going to run about creating illegal laws all over the world, you're going to burn some money. So it's no surprise that they're spending money in these wars that Scotland's going to contribute some of that. But I would rather we didn't do that full stop, to be honest with you. So.
There's just one final comment on the deficit, and that is, we made the first economic case. We made the observation that in the 40 years that I was in business, Scotland grew at 1.8% per annum. The UK grew at 2.3%, London grew at 3.2%, Norway grew at 3.1%, Ireland grew at 5%. What was the growth rate in Greenock? You guys might have been flatlining with what you've lost. So we need to wake up and realise that when you start to run your own economy, just as Drew runs his own business, just as others in the audience run their own businesses, you start with the basis to build your own balance sheet, to start to win more business, to get higher levels of growth, etc. And that virtuous circle that drives it. I used to make the case on a basic accountancy thing, like saying, if you've been told to try and optimise Scotland on a housekeeping allowance, there's the money, just you spend it. It's not as good as if you're running a profit and loss account, a balance sheet, and a cash position, because you've got the feedback of saying, We need to make more sales, we need to cut our costs, we need to get more profit, we need to get a stronger balance sheet, we need to get a better cash position, etc. All that feedback improves it, and if we're in control, we'll get better results and we'll see an end to deficits.
Anyone else have a question?
Thanks very much, thank you. Just a couple of things, a couple of myths. One, Ian, you're not a typical Scot. I only wish you were. There are a lot of us like you, though we want to be more like you. But there's also us who've been around a little bit longer than you. The only chance we've had to have this vote coming up was actually not because of the SNP, in my opinion, it was because of the Labour Party and Socialists. And my point is that Scotland, in my opinion, is a socialist country. We're going to have an election in 2016, I believe, and I'm of the opinion that Scotland will revert to type in 2016. In other words, will be solidly socialist, and I fail to see in many ways how that benefits, to use your own words, capitalists. And that's what's needed to make Scotland a strong country, or any country a strong country. I'm for no, I'm for Great Britain and being part of Great Britain.
I think what you'll see within the next election, there's been a real awakening in Scottish politics because of this referendum campaign. And there's a total new generation out there who have become active in Scottish politics, and they're not going away. And they come from all ends of the political spectrum. And the chances are what you'll see after the next Scottish election will not be any party with an overall majority, but you might have some sort of rainbow coalition. And that would probably be the best thing for a future Scottish government. It'll be interesting to see where all these people who have been campaigning for the yes vote, the radical independents, the Scottish Socialists, Business for Scotland, it'll be interesting to see where they realign themselves. Scotland, I think, is naturally a left of centre country, but we are naturally entrepreneurial as well. And what we're needing, Jim Sillars summed it up. He produced an expression called sensible socialism. And I think that kind of depicts the best of both worlds, to coin a phrase, where we look after the people at the bottom, we pay a good wage for everybody who's working in this country, but we encourage businesses to expand, we give them a facility to expand, and we give them a facility to encourage them to take on apprentices and to take on people out of work. And it's a mix of all these things will lead to a more exciting and forward-thinking country.
Could you answer my question?
Didn't ask the question.
I did ask through the vote that would return to type and it would be socialist.
Labour aren't
My opinion,
socialists.
I'm only asking a question.
Labour in
Yes,
Scotland
no.
aren't socialists.
To try and answer your question, and I hope I'm not just repeating what Drew said here, but to try and answer your question, Drew's right that the Yes campaign is a mix of people, right? From Tories, radical independents, Labour, Lib Dems, a whole mix of it, and they will make up the next face of Scotland. And I don't see, if you look at the white paper, okay, if you look at the white paper, there's lots of things in there in terms of supporting business and growing business, okay? And you know I'm no socialist, okay? So I don't believe that we'll revert to, as you said, a socialist country. I think we need to create jobs, okay? We need to create jobs, we need to create a higher wage economy than we currently have at the moment. What we've got at the moment is a low wage economy, and that doesn't help anybody. So we have to create and invest in a country that will grow jobs, grow wage levels, and grow the size of the economy itself. So I personally, I don't see that happening. I think there's enough people whose views and visions aren't socialism to make sure that we get a balance in Scotland going forward. And I think that's personally what we'll get. But I appreciate it, Dan.
I hope you do, Ian, because I understand how you're trying to make it work and how you think it should work, and I'd support that.
Ian, what would you prefer to take the risk of having some daft left-wing socialist government elected in the next couple of years that might potentially damage our businesses, or just to carry on letting another country elect a government for us.
I'll let you answer that, but I want to come back to that.
I tell you, we've had a succession of right-wing neoliberal approaches in the way that government's been run in Scotland, UK, over recent years. The net effect of that is really pretty horrific when you start looking at the data. I mean, Drew's given us the human aspect of it. Look at Stuart Lansley's data. He tells us that in 1977, before the Thatcher Revolution, the bottom 60% of wage earners in the UK were earning 40% of national income, 40% of the national cake. They're now earning 32%. That's a de facto real terms drop of 20%, and that's the 60% in work, in wages. That is not sustainable. We've got a kind of one-legged walk of capital management and neoliberalism calling the shots, the financialisation of city markets, the kleptocracy of the City of London. And what we're seeing now is the chance to have a better approach, a more balanced approach. We're seeing other countries being able to do that. I think we could do even better here. I don't ever see it being dominated by any one particular side of the equation, because you need a two-legged walk. You need to have the wealth creation and the balance to get more people out and able to consume and take part in it. I've just come back from Ireland, and Ireland's saying with this big experiment with the social partnership, and you know what? It worked really pretty well, but it kind of fell apart a wee bit in 2008 because it got a wee bit toxic. The word got toxic because in partnership, union members thought the unions had sold out, shareholders and analysts thought management had sold out, opposing parties and constituents thought government had sold out. What we now need is to come together where management protects its interests, unions protect their interests, government protects their interests, but we find a common cause about creating a better place, getting more folk in work, extending our life expectancy, and coming into common cause. So the idea of a one-legged socialist walk in Scotland ain't going to happen. I don't believe, especially when we've got opinions like yours in the room and like mine and Ian's, that they want to see that debate balanced.
Is that okay?
Well, yeah, I just hope you don't misunderstand what I was saying. The point I was making is that, you know, I'd rather get the government that I vote for, as opposed to sitting letting someone else vote for it for me.
I think the answer is
what's happened for the last 50 years.
Yeah, he gave us a choice to have a left-wing government, or they would just suffer what we've got at the moment.
And
what we've got at the moment is not sufferable anymore. So it's not, you know.
Can I just ask on these fears, where is there any evidence of a lurch to the left within Scotland? If you look at the Scottish Parliament just now, there's very little representation from far left parties. I do believe Scotland will be naturally left of centre, but I don't think there'll be any mad lurch to the left, and I don't see any evidence of that. Does anyone else?
I'll leave that to the politician. I agree with you. I don't see it myself, but I'll leave this to Jim.
I don't think we'll see that, because now, as I said earlier, we've got 5.31 million auditors that want to see balance, that want to see progress, etc. But I urge you to have a look at the Scottish Government website, look at the report we've just put up, the Working Together review report. And those of you that want to send me an email, my email is jim.maiden@btinternet.com. I'll send you the view of an eminent Oxford professor, Stuart Keep, about that report. Because in that report he says something really quite significant. He says, in writing this report about creating a more collegiate workplace, about bringing together the arm of management and capital together with unions and working people in a more collegiate approach, Scotland's making a move to go North European, where England and London are going transatlantic. I want to go North European.
Time for maybe a couple more.
Come back.
I just want to say something to the audience. I left Greenock when I was 19 and I moved abroad, never ever thinking I was going to come back to this town. I set up a company called Aqua Energy, and I do business in 50 countries. I sell to oil companies, to drilling companies, everything. But I've never ever forgotten that I come from Australia. And what I do is I've started to employ people in Greenock. I've recently taken on a couple of apprentices. I've taken on engineers,
and I'm going to be taking on a lot more. I have never, ever had any help from the British government. I travel all around the world. I've visited British embassies. Never have I seen anything to do with Scotland in any of these embassies. As far as I'm concerned, I've started to bring jobs to Greenock. And if you could see the look in the youngsters that I've just taken on, I pay them very high salaries. And like me, they're starting to travel all around the world. And what I want to see from the new Scottish Government, meaning an independent Scotland, is to get industry back here, because better together never, ever, ever talk about a manufacturing job. And if anybody here, I'll tell you what I did. I actually got an email from Better Together, and I asked them to come to my factory and show me, in 25 years of business, one single tiny thing that the union has done for my business, and I would contribute £20,000 to the No campaign. And not one of them has taken me up on my offer. All I want them to show me is what have they done for my business to bring jobs, and not one of them will do it. And one thing I'm going to say, and it's the last, I've come back to Greenock after away for 47 years, and I cannot believe this town, when I was 19, it's not just the port, not Greenock, it's 78,000 people in it, all working. Today it's got 45,000 people. Our population is half in that period of time. And how anyone from Greenock can support the union, I find it absolutely astonishing.
Just one last thing in this capitalism versus socialism argument. I think you pointed something out very well there, is that you don't have to run a business and be a capitalist pig. Exactly. So what I'm saying is you can still run a business and you can do the right thing. You can still run a business, you can pay people a living wage, you can pay them a good wage, you can give them benefits, you can look after them. By creating jobs doesn't mean you have to be a bad boss, and that's what we try and encourage is people to be good bosses as well, not to bully their bosses, not to bully their staff, especially in this referendum. Give them the information they want, but don't bully them into going yes or no, and certainly don't threaten them with a job. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a Baroque voice, but my grandfather worked at Hastings, so I'd just like to pick up on this social justice thing. You see, having lived in the southeast of England, I don't want to come and see sort of one form of neoliberalism for another type. So I'm wondering how serious you are about the social justice aspect of business. For example, Denmark minimum wage is £13, German pensioners get £400 a week. I mean, is the business community, are you really ambitious for Scotland? That's my question.
As I said when I was speaking, it's important to bring the working man up, the man in the street, to raise his lot, because over the years it's been diminished. I heard Tommy Sheridan speaking one night, and I don't agree with everything Tommy Sheridan says, but he touched on an economic theory that I quite enjoyed. And what he said was, if you gave everybody in the country £10 today, then the millionaires wouldn't notice it because it would just sit in their bank account because they've got everything they need. But the working man in the street, the people of this town, they would go and spend it in the local shops. And all these £10 would generate more business, generate more wages, more employment. And it would go around in this good circle. And that's a kind of theory that a future Scottish Government's got to be thinking about. It's bringing the people at the bottom up, without bringing the people at the top down. If you can manage that, God, it's us.
One last question, we're just after 8 o'clock, so one last question please, if there are any. None? Good, makes it easy. Oh, what we sneak one?
I don't know how to actually frame this. It's not really a question, and I'm not a business person, but it's really to say a big thank you for Jim McDougall coming and bringing business to Port Glasgow, to this area in particular, and to keep the skills in this area. Is there anything that the business community can do to support him in this endeavour, and also to keep their eye on various task force and local councils to make sure that they don't do anything to impede work coming into this? And as a rider to that, I just want to make a comment about today in the town having a general discussion with a local Labour councillor who said that Jim McDougall was just in picking over the bones of Ferguson's. Now, this happened to in my family today, and I just want to make sure that everybody can kind of pull together and try and say, well, this man's come in, let's make a real success of it, and let's make sure that the skills and the name and the work will stay here, and nobody will undo that or talk it down.
Yeah, that's a good point. With having a business in Port Glasgow, I'm delighted that he has come in and done what he's going to do. You mentioned the lead councillor, and you mentioned the way that Jim McDougall has been treated. Now, I thought everything would be okay, and I read the leader of the council's column in the Greenock Telegraph last night, and he mentioned that Jim McDougall was supporting the Yes campaign, but he described him as a tax exile. And I thought, that's a good way to be doing business with somebody that's coming into your community and bringing plenty of money into it. And it was quite disappointing to see these comments.
I'll bypass you, Jim, for a second. Just on the investment point, you're right, £8 million, someone who raises investment companies, £8 million equity is a lot of money. And it's a serious amount of money to get invested, especially, in no disrespect to Ferguson's, but it's not in the best shape in terms of a business. He is not buying a business that's in wonderful shape that he can grow very, very quickly. That's really risky capital, and that is extremely hard to get. So I just hope you're right that all the party politics get just shoved to the side, focus on creating jobs, good value jobs, and there's jobs there, there is work there, and I can guarantee some Jim McDougall will find opportunities. But yeah, absolutely, let's all get behind him. Jim, last time.
I listened to the radio coming down tonight, and there was one of the Ferguson's workers that were reinstated talking, saying that Jim McDougall had spoken to them today for 30 minutes. For 30 minutes. These men sound as though they'd never been talked to by management for more than 30 seconds in the past. So I think that's a great sign. The GMB trade union official saying really positive, really great potential here. This gentleman here, his techniques and tools, etc., great man to complement what Jim's doing there. And in answer to your question, I think the big thing to do here is to help them get together with the rest of the assets that are here in Greenock, and Port Glasgow. Have an asset mindset, how we bring folk together, start the conversation about what else can we do, how can we augment this, who else should be supporting us from government, who's going to benefit, how can they chip in to make it happen, and get the conversation going. We are a collaborative species. When we see a North Star that we can get together, we really go for it. I'm guided by a lovely woman called Margaret Wheatley. Margaret Wheatley says, every sphere of human endeavour looks like quantum physics. Chaotic, disordered, inexplicable, irresolvable. And she says, you know, if you get a North Star, a concrete goal of what you're going to try and do for industrial manufacturing Inverclyde, if you can bring the right people together, if you can get good communications, if you can get a bit of trust, a bit of government support, a bit of enlightened self-interest for all the individuals, it can become dramatically self-ordering. I think we're in a position here just now where we can have a resurgence. If we just keep the faith and keep working at it now, and get more folk coming back with more capital. But Jim McDougall's done us all a big favour.
Okay, nothing left to say. Thanks very much to Jim, thanks to Drew, thanks to Michelle from Business in Scotland, who's been wonderful and helped me organise this thing, set it up. She's been helping tonight as well, and she's been annoying the living daylights out for the last few days as well. So thanks very much, Michelle, and safe journey to everyone. Thanks very much.